jump into my actual questions, I was going through all of your profiles. What interesting here is, it's a very interesting mix of panelists today. Media background, 20 years, Times of India, Sajid, and then jumping into a VC world. An entrepreneur selling, being a serial entrepreneur, then selling your company, acquiring it by Mahindra, right? And then jumping into a VC world. And Anu, from a corporate world, finance background, jumping into a VC world. So it's like, which part of the, I'm like, wow, this is very interesting mix. So Anu, starting with you, I would like to understand what encouraged you to.
I think VC world is lucrative. But no, actually, how my journey specifically started was my family started investing into startups a couple of years ago. So it kind of became a dining table conversation for us around startups, what was happening. And to the point where I jumped in, took it on as a career. So basically, I'm wearing two hats. Although I'm working in the VC space, but I also invest into startups in a personal capacity. So basically, Venture Catalyst is paying me to do the job and also keep scouting for good deals for myself. Yeah,
That's
I can.
interesting. What brings you to the VC world?
Well, I used to be an investor in the US
Okay.
before I moved back to India to start a company, which took me 6 years to build an exit. It was probably one of the toughest journeys I've gone through. So I think the inspiration for me to be in VC is to tell entrepreneurs what not to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I feel young again, guiding, working with VCs, with entrepreneurs in a variety of different sectors. So I think it's just very exciting to be on this side with an entrepreneur-friendly approach.
Sajid.
Yeah, I'm a accidental VC to be honest. Uh, I spent nearly 2 decades in Times, and while I kind of used to write a bit about this space and think through this, I could never imagine myself to be in venture capital. Coincidentally, it so happened that Karthik Reddy, who started Bloom Ventures, and me worked together. He was my boss. And at some point in 2017, Karthik reached out saying, "Hey, we've done two funds. We kind of going into larger check sizes, uh, and we're getting more deeper. We need someone who kind of writes and thinks and about the space a bit, who can kind of because we need to build a strong thesis, etc." And it so happened that I was kind of bored with my life in Times, and so I had experience in media and education. It's kind of fitted in, but I'm also cognizant that I don't think my entry into venture capital would have happened in any other firm. It's entirely accidental. If it was, no, I mean, because I really don't tick off those convenient boxes. And I was 42 when the WhatsApp messages from Karthik landed in my WhatsApp box. So I must say, entirely accidental. But now that I'm on this side, I'm really, really enjoying it. To me, venture capital is like, you're really getting every pitch is some senses is a vision of the future. And what you're getting really is these postcards from the future telling you this is what our vision of the future is like. And to me, to be here, looking at that, to see what India could be like in 5, 7, 10 years, hugely exciting place to be. There's no place I would rather.
Great. So, to start with my question goes to Anu again. So, Anu, now in India and all over the world, there's a boom called corporate innovation. How do you see the trend in India? And what do you think going when we see 5 years, 10 years down the line, India becoming what kind of an ecosystem when it comes to corporate innovation?
I think, Neha, a lot of corporates today have woken up to the fact that if they do not bring in these innovations or do not start working with the startups, they will be left behind. So a lot of them have come on with their own corporate programs, innovation programs where they want to work with these startups. A lot of work still requires to be done in terms of the mindset that they have because they still sometimes looking for very tailor-made solutions that kind of slows down the work of the startup and the adoption of the solution. But definitely a lot of work is happening, and I think we will see that shift more and more happening. Um I remember when I went for some of these some of these events outside of India, there are so many corporate VCs. We don't see that in India. And that shift needs to come where we will see corporate VCs coming up in India. I think in 5 years, that's one trend that probably in this chair, you'll have a corporate VC sitting, surely.
Okay, do you want to add, like, you have been in both world, right? Silicon Valley and in India. Do you see that shift happening in India, maybe slowly, but
Yeah, for sure. I think um, from 7 years ago when I moved to India, where we are now, almost every large corporate has a corporate venture capital.
Mhm.
So that's a change in itself. I think it's still a continuous journey for corporates to learn on how to support innovation, how to back entrepreneurs. Um, I had some really interesting discussions when I was looking to exit my company because people really didn't understand how to back a company that was 5 or 6 years old. Uh, you know, we are used to asking for revenue multiples as entrepreneurs. Large corporates understand only EBITDA and cash flow. Um, that bridge is that bridge is still not formed in,
yeah.
in terms of both ecosystems understanding each other. So I think there's a long way to go. As Anu said, you will definitely see a lot more corporates playing an active role, whether it's directly through their balance sheets or through the family offices. I think Sajid and I probably we've seen a bunch of family offices co-invest with us at Kalari and Bloom, and that itself is a step in the right direction. Um, but I would say that I think when it comes to the new generation of startups, SaaS, fintech, um, you're seeing corporates play more of an active role as limited partners in VC firms, where we as VCs are getting their guidance anyways or their capital to support startups. So somewhere the worlds are already connected. It's just it's happening at its own pace.
Sajid, for you, sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
you want to answer?
No, no,
I
no.
want to tweak a question a little bit. Same question. Do you think investors in India are, investing in startup with a perspective? They are investing more in B2B startup with a perspective कि कोई corporate आएगा और acquire कर लेगा. Is it like that? Is the mindset of Indian VCs or
Right,
investors is like
right
that?
question for Sajid.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting question. I don't think there is a very clear strategy or at least objective that this is going to get acquired by another company because if you actually see the kind of monies paid, and I think they've kind of alluded to it, that we fund in a very different way. We look at the future and work backwards. And it's actually interesting because a lot of CFAs and all come to us saying, yeah, venture capital. And we tell them that there's no valuation as such in our business. It's a question of how much equity. And that's actually the secret, so valuation is just a function of how much money you need versus how much equity I want. The ratio of those two determine your valuation. It's actually shocking, but it's true. So versus them, which are very EBITDA driven, saying we can't give more than 8 multiples. So the fact is, there's no M&A market in India yet. Okay, will it get built? I hope so. US, in fact, take Google. I mean, you think Google's built everything on its own? No, they acquired Waze and Where to build Google Maps. I could give you hajar examples of that where they took smaller companies and they built it into that. India needs to get there, but it's going to take time. As of now, and I hope the prices that larger Indian corporates are paying for startups go up. Really has to go up because right now, what happens is the $3, $4, $5 million exit venture. The startup guys make some $1, $2 million. That's great for them. They should make more. But we virtually make nothing because they tend to be more like acquihires. But with some of the exits that are beginning to happen, we're beginning to see. And my hope is that 5, 6 years from now, there'll be a flourishing M&A market where corporates buy startups, use those startups to build even higher, larger $100 million businesses.
What happens to B2C startup? What is the market? Where's the trend? What, is the message going out that only focus on B2B and don't focus on B2C? Is it like that? What is the suggestion for those kind of a startup who are focusing B2C market?
So I'll try and answer that, Neha, because we have a lot of B2C startups in our portfolio, and we have seen acquisitions happen. Beardo is case in point, which is a men's grooming brand. Marico came and acquired them. We have to understand, and like what Sajid said, it gives them agility to build on a new product category. If if a corporate was to do it on their own, it's a very different ball game for them. But for them to acquire a startup, it gives them a lot of agility and a way forward. It's a much faster way for them to grow. So even in B2C, you will see a lot of FMCG companies wanting to come and acquire these startups if fundamentally the products are good. And I'm talking about a lot of family offices that we work with who have been running traditional businesses but would like to kind of get into new categories, but are exploratory through the startup ecosystem.
I think, in my opinion, um, we've obviously gone through a massive funding cycle with VCs in India, but more importantly, VCs in the US, all over the world, Japan. Everybody is looking at India as a place where they can invest, and they have high expectations. They would expect whatever's played out in China will probably play out in India much faster, much quicker. So I think we are on top of the cycle.
Yeah.
If maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the entrepreneurs that took their businesses public, for example, Deep Make My Trip or India Mart now more recently, I have a huge amount of respect for those businesses because they really have, they've bootstrapped in a lot of ways. They've taken conventional capital and they've had visibility on sort of, you know, uh, uh, India Mart is a great example of building a business conventionally at slower scale, but profitability and sustainability. I think that's going to come back again, right? So once the cycle kind of turns again, um, all of us in this room, VCs and entrepreneurs, are going to have to think about profitability again. So unit economics are becoming very important. Not just because SoftBank says it, because they are important. I mean, you cannot burn, multiple rupees to earn a single rupee, and that is going to change again. And I think we're going to talk about, CLTVs and customer acquisition costs. But we are far along from where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't think VCs invest with the mindset of, hey, which corporate will buy this? But I think VCs should start thinking about whether I can take this business public on its own, right? Will this generate enough cash flow for public retail investors to understand? Will it be a WeWork kind of story or a story of a business that's, very sustainable in terms of, not burning capital and having customers?
Not making pure investments, but they are also getting into a startup as in strategic investment. So the next question is usually how far and how much VCs are helping their investee companies when it comes to business scale up, connecting to the different world, and how closely do you work with your investee companies and how do you help them grow beyond capital?
There's a joke which goes, I don't know, it's often said that what's the difference between a consultant and a VC? And the joke goes that the consultant gives advice and takes money, whereas the VC gives money to give advice. And yeah, and I mean, I used to hear this out a lot, but only when I joined the firm did I really understand and get the sense that it's actually very true. Because fundamentally, great entrepreneurs have choice, and what makes them choose one VC? I mean, Scalari, Zoom, Sequoia, Lightspeed. It's the quality of the advice that comes bundled with that. That is really down to the partner or principal who's working on that. And most VC firms, most good VC firms, know that money alone is not going to help the company grow. So we bundle on a lot of stuff with it. So all of us have reasonably strong platform teams. Some a little more spiky in one area. Okay. So for example, where all do we help? Hiring. Okay, hiring is one big area because getting the right person in can make a huge difference. Two, fundraising. Okay, in fundraising, so we have a colleague, for example, who's an ex-investment banker whose role is to help connect them to like investors further down the value chain, like for example, Callery, Sequoia, Lightspeed, Bertelsmann, and Iron Pillar, and so on, or the Chinese investors, etc. Third is actually very interesting. So we've hired a biz dev person, and so for example, he's the one who has a relationship with Ram, and his role is to help our startups accelerate faster through relationships with, for example, DigitalOcean. How can our startups take advantage of some of the tech that they have? How can they scale up faster? So certainly making those conversations happen is a big focus area. And not just DigitalOcean, but multiple set of companies. and including business development. Like if there is a particular startup, if they can sell, can we introduce them to other larger companies? So we do all of that. So these are the broad four areas. Apart from that, there's a lot of strategic advice where, I mean, we are counselors, we are 3am
Yeah.
kind of friends in that sense. So I don't think it's going to be dissimilar for Kalari or even venture capitalists. Venture capitalists is slightly more different, but I don't think it's going to be dissimilar. And I'm sure they would love.
No, I have nothing to add. I mean, that's essentially where we.
So I'll just, you want to add?
Yeah, I'll add because we are not structured like a VC fund.
Yep.
Our underlying value that we bring along with the capital is the network of angel investors that we have. Now, most of these angel investors are successful entrepreneurs in their own various sector or spaces or geographies that they're based out of. So that is a strength we get on the table for the startups to kind of dig into. Which is what kind of echoes what Neha is trying to say, that with money, a lot of other support is required, and this is what we bring through the angel network, through the angel investors that we have.
I mean, one small point that I'll make is if, for example, a Bloom, Kalari, whoever invests, entrepreneurs get external validation that XYZ has invested and maybe this is the right model. And then we come on board, we do whatever we're supposed to do as VCs to open doors and in any direction. As Sajid mentioned, I won't get into those points. It's very important when you take capital from any of these VCs, you don't listen to them too much. I think it's very important that when you had a vision when you started, it was a grand vision, you stick to that, you don't get influenced too much because no matter what we do, we're still not involved in your business day to day. You know your business best. So we can act as supporters, and that's what a good VC should do. But we're still relying on you to sort of execute on that large vision.
My next question comes to Dev. When should a startup stop raising funds and concentrate on making profits?
I think tomorrow. The time has come. It was a lot easier for people to raise money, as I said, on the promise of future profits. But if you build a business which has solid unit economics from, let's say, Series A, which is when Kalari comes in, right? Seed rounds, you're still figuring out your model, you're showing traction, angel investors are coming in, early stage. So you're taking a few $100,000 to prove that traction. You can't worry about profitability then. But when you're coming to a Series A or Series A investor, have visibility on how you will make money, like I said, on every unit sold. That doesn't mean you make money on the bottom line level, but it's important that your like I said, your customer acquisition costs can be lowered over time. And over the next few years, you can demonstrate that that particular customer will be highly valuable for you. Economies of scale will play in. All those things are important from an early stage because I think once this growth capital kind of dwindles in India, the entrepreneurs who've thought about that, who have enough cash on their balance sheets, who run the business the right way, will do far better. Obviously, I could be completely wrong if people start coming in and backing models for 5-10 years with no visibility and profit. But this is what the advice I would give as a conservative person who's built a business.
How are strategies different for B2B and B2C startups? When it comes
How
to
is
strategies are different for B2B and B2C startups when it comes to cash burn.
cash
Second-
burn?
Second is how important is the balance between customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value?
Okay, it was a complex one. It's a book, not a question. Huh? Yeah, or at least a blog post. Okay, let me take the first one. How's strategy around cash burn, you said, right? Okay, so I think B2B, B2C, I don't think are fundamentally different, but what makes it different is that B2B can get by with lesser capital, more capital efficient, primarily because of the nature of the market. Okay, there are B2B models which are expensive, I'm not denying that, but broadly, B2B is capital efficient. A lot of cash burn is linked indirectly to ability to raise funding. If, for example, I'm a Series A company, and if I still need, if growth is a huge objective still, okay, and Series B capital is very easy to come by, I'm hot, I don't think reducing cash burn is a big focus area, okay? It may come up, but it's not a focus area. So a lot is linked to capital availability. Even at Series B, and that's what Dave's alluding to, historically, Series C was the pre-IPO capital, and that's the role, for example, ICICI Venture, etc., created. But what has happened over the last few years is that there's been a wave of uh, I can name names. It's not controversial. Naspers, some of the Chinese guys, etc. Tencent. They've all come and said, "Hey, look, we think this can be huge, mega billion-dollar businesses. Just grow. Okay, we'll see. Okay, and IPO, no problem. I think you. I don't know. So that is kind of that mood is easing a little bit thanks to the SoftBank WeWork debacle. And hopefully, if we go back to the older era of Series C being pre-IPO capital, then I think around Series B is when kind of you need to tamper down cash burn significantly. Obviously, you will be gross margin profitable by then, get EBITDA positive, and then even bottom line positive by Series C. So it's fundamentally to do with capital availability. Capital availability is slightly easier for B2C companies. Hence, they worry less about cash burn, and B2B companies don't do. That's broadly the thing. There is this 3:1 number I kind of hear about, that your LTV and CAC has to be 3:1. I never studied it so much. If Dave studied it and he's this thing and he's an entrepreneur, I would love to kind of hear
Yeah.
from him.
Yeah, Dev.
No, I mean, it depends on the business, right? So there's no thumb rule as to whether it's B2B, B2C. I think that ratio works fine. It's important to know as an entrepreneur, as a VC, let's say I was investing in an entrepreneur, we would know what kind of growth capital that particular business could attract in the next 3 or 4 years. And that's where that ratio comes out, right? So if you know for sure that there will be a global investor looking to back this business and taking it to $1 billion valuation, you never know that, but you have visibility that those models have played out in the US or in China and they will be backed, then you burn accordingly and you line up 6 to 12 months in advance the right amount of capital to support that vision, right? But if you don't have visibility on that, please focus more on CLTV than cash burn.
Anu, next question for you. As angel investors, startups comes to you guys first, right? So, what are the trends? In Indian startup ecosystem, especially as an investor, what do you see as a current market trend? Startup building for Bharat versus startup building for global market.
I think the buzzword is huge around Bharat today, not just with the Indian investors, even investors overseas. Everybody is buying into the Bharat story. And I think there is merit there. The startups that we've had so far have been targeting mostly the urban population, but majority of India still lies in Bharat. So yes, there is a lot of merit for Bharat, but that doesn't mean that India cannot build a global product and we should not focus on building global markets. I think we have the talent. That simultaneously, parallelly will happen. But I think what is unique to India, that's a huge market opportunity for startups to even build for Bharat along with global products. There should not be a bifurcation कि सिर्फ भारत के लिए बनाना है तो मैं successful होऊंगा. It's got to be parallelly depending upon what your product is really.
Want to add, Dev, on this?
For me, the lines are pretty well divided, right? If you're a B2C business, you are chasing the India customer story,
Yeah.
right? There is no other larger consumer market, customer market than India. And that's what you should focus on. It'll be dicey if you say, hey, I make a consumer product, in a year from now, I'm going to take it global. If you're a B2B business, everybody knows that global businesses want to adapt to cloud-based SaaS. That's the story that's playing out. If you're building, especially in this environment, a lot of the entrepreneurs will be there. You have to globalize. And inside sales, remote sales are only a way to get your business started. Eventually, once you get a strong investor on board, you have to have that vision, or you have to have those team members on board saying who can actually execute sales for you in the US, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, Bharat versus depends on the models you're chasing.
We've had primarily businesses, for example, companies have gone global. Grey Orange, which is possibly our biggest hit, the founders live in Singapore and Atlanta now. DataWeave is relocated to the Valley. Squad is half Valley, half this, and Tuki Taki is Singapore. Many examples I can give. Primarily, they are a category of startups like Freshworks. Girish sits in the Bay Area now, which are talent in India, but the market is the world. Okay, and primarily if you're like that and you pretty much very early on understand that And all startups come out of a desire to solve a particular consumer or customer problem. It's a business problem, or okay, and each B2B problem is also a particular customer problem. Like, oh, we're not able to download data fast enough, or we're not able to make sense of this. So primarily these are universal problems. And historically, India never had a flourishing local B2B market, which is beginning to change now. Okay, the Khata book is an example. We call it SMB, SMB startups, whatever, but the unique Indian use cases. So I would say you have to be global problems. So we have a startup, we have an investment called Procall, which helps large corporates buy better. But it's an India-specific problem. I don't think they have the confidence because they're not able to go and apply the same things abroad, because there's a lot of services angle to it also. So if you have a product which is can be globally, this thing can be delivered over the cloud, then you're better off look. And if that is a larger market, those are the checkpoints, I would say. Talent can be here. You can also get talent there. Talent in India has also been expensive now. So I would say broadly, are the problems you're solving large global problems? Can it be delivered over the cloud? Can you make do with lean manpower there, etc.?
So, Dev and Sajid, especially to you, I have seen the train. Earlier, we used to run an accelerator. Now we are just funding early stage startups. There was a gap between technology mentors in India, right? And that's the reason most of the good technology companies used to spend a lot of time raising funds in India because they were not polished, they lack something. So, what do you think has changed now in India? Or still there is a gap, and is it still the better market for technology startup, hardcore AI, ML startups? They should launch first in global market and then come to India, or what is your mindset there?
I mean, I think most of the SaaS companies that we are investing in, even full stack
Yeah.
consumer businesses, are AI ML applications, right? Nobody is inventing the wheel, right? At least from what I've seen, deep tech is still starting in India. I mean, they're literally rocket science businesses being funded now by VCs, but those are few and far between. Predominantly, what people are doing is, borrowing existing technologies, computer vision, spectral, whatever it is, and they're finding applications for it in consumer markets. Sigtuple is doing that in, medical diagnostics. So at least I think from the point of where we've gone from basic programming to be able to apply these deep tech technologies in India, and there's enough talent available to be able to do that. I get skeptical when you're talking about really drastic, technologies that take 5-7 years to see the light of day, that will come out of India, right? Honestly, I'm still skeptical. Would be happy to be surprised on that. But it's a cumulative effect. A lot of startups have come out. We're seeing this. A lot of the successful entrepreneurs that we see now have come out of tech, e-commerce businesses, Flipkart, the entire, the Oyos of the world. Similarly, you're seeing CTOs come out of previous companies to build more sophisticated stacks. So I think the time is here for us to be cutting edge in terms of technology. But I'd like to see a lot more. We're definitely not close to Israel when it comes to,
Absolutely
deep tech.
not.
Yeah.
Sajid, what do we think? The gap of hand holding the hardcore technology startup. Still, there's a huge gap in India versus when we go to Israel or Silicon Valley.
Yeah, there is a gap, and I think he alluded to it. I do think that it'll get better. It'll get better as our ecosystem evolves. But to keep in mind that India, one key issue we have is that the academia industry links are weak. Okay, they are not strong. Even both on biotech as well as on the technology side. There is not enough. I hate to say it, but I try. Hopefully not controversial, but I don't think there's enough original moonshot type research that comes out of India yet. Get there, not yet. So there isn't enough original stuff. There is some original stuff. The linkages to then commercialize this are not that strong. Not enough great university incubators, etc. exist. We don't have the kind of relationship that Stanford has with startups. So that will take time. Two, we don't have a large pool of tech mentors, etc. in India yet. Because if you are reasonably in that tech space, you're mentoring, etc. You have the opportunity to even create something. So you'd much rather create something. So, but it's getting better. More and more senior entrepreneurs are willing to share. In our companies, for example, in Bloom, we have a CTO WhatsApp group. We have these exchanges, events. The senior guys are beginning to mentor the younger guys. We have talks, etc. So, but there is a gap. I'm not denying it right now. But the other thing is, a lot of the Valley guys are happy to help. We are beginning to see a lot of interest from Indians in Valley
Absolutely.
to help Indian startups. And many of these younger startups are actually bypassing us and talking to them directly, and which is great as well.
Even there is a shift when it comes to academia and universities. Like most of them have the incubation supported by the government, and the alumni network is something really crazy. What's happening there in the ecosystem now?
Yeah.
Most of them have shifted to Valley in different parts of the world, and now happy to help their incubating startups and all. So this is the shift is happening. Yep. So Anu, yes.
I think corporates also need to become far more active in India.
Absolutely.
That will help this bridge this gap.
Absolutely. So, Anu, the theses and current priorities of your respective investment firms, how do you have difficult conversations and arrive at a consensus during discussion?
This is with the founders or within the team, you ask?
Within the team?
That's a tough one, Neha. There have been situations where the team does not come on consensus. We've had our hits and misses in terms of our investment decisions, but I guess that's what we learn to live with. Um, sometimes we are able to bypass the difference in opinion. Sometimes we have to live with it. We've had our misses. So I think it's all part of the game. I mean, that'll happen always in teams. Everybody will not be on the same page where a decision is required.
And what do you look out for a startup when you think as a team you
So
want
see,
to
Neha, typically most startups that when they are approaching to us, they are much younger in age. They've just got their product right, testing it out. For us, founders become the most important piece in this selection process. Then comes how big is the market, how big is the problem that they are addressing, how unique is the solution, what is the scalability that we see, how fast can they grow. These are a couple of things that are the first metrics of selection that we put into place, and then other things roll on. But there is no compromise per se on the founder quality. No matter how good an idea, how big a market, if we do not have conviction on the founder, there is no way, let alone a VC, let alone an angel investor, a VC will not give you money. हम लोग VCs के पास ले भी जाएंगे, ये लोग बोल देंगे यार बहुत बढ़िया, पर नहीं यार, founder पे conviction नहीं आया, तो हम ही फंस जाएंगे. So, yeah. See, don't ever be threatened. Once an investor gives you money, he is married to you. All right? Never see an investor as a threat. He's putting, as an angel investor, especially, he is putting his hard-earned money into your startup. He is never there to irritate you or to take your startup south. There may be difference in opinions, how you may want to do it, how you may want to go ahead in certain things, but always believe in your heart that he has the best when he's telling you something. Although you guys have to be on the driver's seat always. Remember that. Like the way I think, Dave, you mentioned that you have to run your business. There is no gray area in that. You have to run your business. But when the investor gives advice, it's really not to pull you guys down or take control of the business. Really not. Please treat us as friends. And believe me, most often than not, angel investors become your best friends. They are the shoulder to cry on. Because we've met you at a time when you were babies. And I can tell you, I can vouch for that. Some of our founders who've gone on and raised their Series B and onwards, if they want to cry, that's the number they dial. Because a VC will still look at them in a very professional way. Angel investor kahin na kahin family ban jata hai.
But on that, Anu, and on with Dev and Sajid, I have seen that many of the angel investors, as well as they, I don't know if they're shy, afraid, or whatever will be the word, but they always prefer co-investing and they do not pick up the entire round. Okay, and then startups complains that, I have to manage so many investors, I have to give balance sheets and lot many things and answers to all the investors. So how do you think a startup will not get afraid?
I don't know what to say on that. हमारा तो model ही पूरा co-investment के basis पे है. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We are very open to
But then
co-invest.
how do you get that comfort level in the startup founder that, okay, maybe there are 10 investors, but you need not have to worry. All the 10 are going to help you out. How do you get that comfort level?
Usually there's, in that set of investors, it's usually one or two who are the lead investors who will be typically interacting more with the startup. You're not going to be dealing with 10 different investors answering all their calls. Most of them will be taking a little more backseat kind of an approach. That's the way we see it in our circles. In that angel round, I think Dave and Sajid can shed a little light where you guys have invested with 3 or 4 other VCs. How does it pan out there?
Don't worry about the co-investment part. I think a lot of times VCs themselves figure out who's going to take the lead in a particular deal, who understands the sector better. So that's less for you guys to worry about. I would say angel A, try to stick to one investor. Don't complicate your capital structure because you're very busy building. Actually, that baby is not even walking yet at that time. So you get 20 people commenting on how the baby is walking, you'll get distracted. So at least till your A round, I would say keep it pretty clean on your capital structure. To your original question in terms of tips, the only thing I would say, I have built a business which probably was not a VC investable business. I went into hardware in agriculture, knowingly that probably it would be a cash flow focused business, but I took venture capital for it. And then I paid the price where for a couple of years I had to rewire my entire business to make it profitable and then sell it to a strategic. I would advise entrepreneurs to be very clear on the kind of scale they're looking to achieve, right? If you want to make a 100 crore business, 50 crore business, 1,000 crore business, want to take it public, be very clear with that. There's capital available to each kind of business. For VCs, they all want to get to 1,000 crore scale, right? But there are, like I said, family offices, angel investors who will do multiple rounds in your company, strategics, to help you get there. So be very clear when you come to a VC or talk to them about the kind of scale that you see for a particular model. And if the space is good, if you're good as an entrepreneur, maybe you guys will rework the model into something great. But don't go out there and make a pitch saying, this will 1,000 crore business is clearly in sight. Be convinced internally before you externally pitch. That's the only advice that I would give.